Here in Canada right now, Senator, the First Nations people were not recognized as human beings until 1960. They only make up 1% of the Canadian population, yet they're making up 50% of our prison population. There's also the residential schools were in existence from 1890s right up to 1984 here in Canada, which were government institutions ran by certain churches, and over 50,000 Aboriginal children were killed. Countless others were molested, tortured, physically and mentally. So our country has a very dark past, and also at the same time, with our current system we have in place, I feel that once a government gets into power, it's almost like democratical dictatorship, because there's no checks and balances. Even with the Constitution of the province of British Columbia, if you read it, it has the premier at the top, then it has lieutenant governor just below him, and if lieutenant governor is just a rubber stamp, even though he has the ability to say it doesn't want this bill passed, they put someone in place there that basically just stamps it and goes and passes the will of the government. So the people aren't getting any representation at all, I feel, in Canada and the province of British Columbia at this time.
Reg, that's probably an accurate description of the situation, and I can copy that in my experiences in Alaska. When you talk about what's been done to the indigenous people, when I first went to Alaska, we were taking kids out of the villages and sending them down to Oklahoma for education. I was the one that introduced the regional high school system in Alaska to thwart that whole activity so that we could educate children near where their parents lived. I thought it was an abomination. But, it takes time to change. We've both, whether it's Canada, United States, New Zealand, Australia, wherever the white race has gone to colonize, or Africa, we do not have a very moral past. And it's very tragic that this has been the history of the world, but that's a problem we face, and we need to correct it, and we need to, in a sense, handle some reparation in that regard. And the reparation that I see is education, and of course, the United States, we fail in that regard. But and I don't know the situation in Canada with respect to education. But the answer is education, because that is the only thing. You can't solve many of the ills that you've done for earlier generations or the older generation, but you can look to what you can do for the next generation. And the best you can do for them is to educate them and prepare them properly for what their life could become. Now, here again, the best policy to do that is if you equip the people to be able to vote on policy issues. I got to tell you, they will be much more concerned about voting for laws that will protect and improve the quality of the life for their children than they will be for funding appropriations for participation in NATO and participation in Afghanistan.
Yeah, Senator, I'm also someone that supports teaching the children, because I believe that our future generation need to learn from our horrendous past, is a way of saying it. At the same time, here in Vancouver, the city of Vancouver, the poorest postal code in Canada is East Hastings. What we're seeing the results of the residential schools where there's a high population of First Nations. There are drug addicts here, there are alcoholics here, and we're seeing what happened out of that. And the federal Canadian government's answer to this was, each First Nation that went through there, we're going to give you a point system, we're going to give you money. You have to basically, and then we'll give you up to $10,000 for all the abuse that you went through, but you have to prove you went through that abuse. So what happens is the government has turned its back on the people, and I'm looking at it going, the only way to correct this problem is to embrace the First Nations and say, we're going to put all this stuff within our curriculums. We're going to put all this stuff that we've done so that way the children can realize this is what Canada really did in the past. And that way, when the people grow up and they're able to take the power for the future, they're able to sit back to their children and say, okay, this is the mistakes we made in the past, but we learn from them because we won't repeat these mistakes again.
All of that and the above. There's no question. In Alaska, we have a very large indigenous population. And alcohol, I'm very familiar with the alcoholism problem. And God, if there's anything I've seen happen, is the cycle of a village going dry and then going wet, and going dry and then going wet. It's almost something that is it can be very frustrating and insoluble. It just needs a continuing social effort in that regard. And here too, that's why I have a lot more confidence in a broader-based social policy that emanates from the people, not just from the government, and a mixture of the people and the bureaucratic experience coupled together. These are just difficult and frustrating problems, and just yelling about them. Here, I'll give you an example. My views on drugs. I think the prohibition on drugs is ridiculous. I would decriminalize drugs. I think that marijuana is not addictive, and if you want an example of that, take a conservative country like Portugal, a Catholic conservative country, has had great success in decriminalizing all drugs. With respect to marijuana, you can buy it, it's taxable, and with respect to hard drugs, if you want them, you can get to a doctor, get a prescription, and you can get the drug that you need to sustain yourself. And then if you need help, it's readily available. I'm not talking about the Netherlands. I'm not talking about Switzerland. I am talking about a conservative Catholic country like Portugal, and it has been an unbelievable success. All you got to do is go on the internet and click on Portugal.gov, and you can get the reports that they're putting out. It's awesome as to what improvements they've been able to make. We have been on a kick in the United States and Canada and other parts of the world, primarily led by the misunderstanding. When I was in the Senate in the United States, Richard Nixon commissioned a study by a conservative Republican governor of Pennsylvania about the drug issue, and he came up with a study. It's called the Schaefer Report. And that report indicated that marijuana was not a gateway drug, was not addictive, and that we should end the prohibition on, or end the criminal regulation of hard drugs, and go into the treat hard drugs like a public health issue, like it is. And Nixon took that report, put it on a shelf, because he did not want to displease the religious right, and lo and behold, that's what started the first onslaught of the war on drugs in the United States. We've spent over $1 trillion on this war, and we have not diminished the problem one iota. All we've done is load up our prisons. All we've done is destabilize and criminalize millions of people and destabilize foreign governments ad nauseum. Here, anybody who's been to the movies has seen the effect of prohibition on alcohol, how unsuccessful it was in the 20s. And now, if any objective observer can see how the prohibition on drugs has been unsuccessful, but the body politic has been so cowardly to not face up to this and to treat the drug problem for what it is, which is a medical problem, a public health problem, not a criminal problem. But that's my personal view on the subject, and I think if we could empower the people to make laws they would deal with this problem in a heck of a lot more intelligent fashion than have the leaders of representative government.